and welcome to the first episode of the Work.knits podcast. This will be a knitting podcast predominantly, but I'm really excited to see where this space develops and where this goes. I thought I'd give you a little bit of background on myself and why I started the podcast, given this is the first episode, but I promise to keep it brief. So my name is Lauren. I live in the southwest of England in the United Kingdom. There are lots of amazing makers in this area of the world, but we're all a little bit spaced out, and I don't currently have any local knitting friends or a kind of local knitting community to plug into. So I thought I would create this space to connect with more knitters and to share what I'm up to and get some more inspiration for my making. You'll hear the name Work.knits crop up from time to time during this podcast. Work.knits is the brand name for my micro knitwear design and knitting product business. The idea is this podcast won't be based around that business, but it will crop up in relation to things that I knit, and I'm more than happy to share behind the scenes on that tiny commercial venture if that would be of interest to people. You know, this podcast, my plans are to start out with a very kind of conventional knitting podcast format, but I'm very happy for this to grow and evolve and develop in line with what's of most interest to all of you. So to kick things off, let's get started talking about some recent finished objects. I'm really hoping that the light is going to stay with me this evening. I'm recording on a beautiful, fresh winter's evening here in England. I've got a beautiful sunset opposite me, but very conscious that the light is going to be fairly limited. So I'd like to kind of keep this brief and hope that you can see the quality of products in the right light. Before I get started, any colourway names, specific yarns, anything I mention, I will include links in the description box below. But of course, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm very, very happy to get in touch and meet some of the people who are enjoying these videos. So my first finished object is actually one that I'm wearing, and again, I don't know if the light is going to be doing this many favours and to what extent you'll be able to see this in detail. This is a worsted weight wrap. It is actually one of my own designs. I have just released it. It is called the Market Day Shawl. And the idea is that this is something to throw on at the weekends or when you are just kind of walking into town, walking into your village, wherever you live. But something you can throw on, not think too much about, but hopefully kind of sits in place from a practical perspective and also really brings your outfit together, is the idea. So I'll take this off temporarily, although it is a bit chilly this evening. Crazy hair. So this design is kind of a geometrical semicircular shape. You knit from one point and you increase stitches up to a certain width. You then knit straight and then you decrease, and then there's an applied border. And what I really like about this is that it means you're only knitting the full wingspan or rows that are the same length as the wingspan for a maximum of 15 rows, and that's on the border. But it means the shawl goes really, really quickly. I wanted something that wasn't just enjoyable to wear, but was also a really enjoyable knit. So I'm going to put this back on as it's a little bit chilly. The final feature of the wrap is an I-cord edge that is applied at the end to all the sides where you have not added the knitted on border. So as I said, all detailed in my recent pattern release, which is available on Ravelry under Work.knits Designs, I believe. Work.knits, maybe one word. I will put a link below. And I've kept my patterns hopefully relatively accessible, particularly in terms of price, but in order to do that, my patterns are not currently test knit or tech edited. So any feedback you have would be very, very welcome. I do want to continue to improve these, and hopefully at some point I will be able to absorb the cost of proper tech editors and will hopefully have the time to organise test knits around my day job. Final things to say about the shawl, now that we've covered off construction, is to say what it's made from. It is made in Gilead, which is Dererum Natura's worsted weight base in the colour Foray. This took 2.5 balls of that yarn, so also not too kind of yarn hungry, if that's a phrase. And I think I knit this on 5mm needles, but again, all details will be in the pattern. But very, very happy with this finished object. It has accompanied me on recent trips to the Nordic countries, and I've really, really enjoyed wearing it. So, next finished object, and again, I'm hoping the light is going to be able to show this in all its glory. This is the Brighter Sweater, or the Bright Sweater, by Junko Okamoto. I hope I'm pronouncing the designer's name correctly. I have knit this up in 2 strands of Holst yarn in, I think it's their silver grey colourway. Quite a few moderations to this pattern, or modifications to this pattern I should say, predominantly because, and this is probably user error, but I couldn't get the increases that happen above the bust to happen correctly. I could follow the instructions, but I then ended up with what looked like a very gathered fabric, and I also then couldn't get it the stitch counts to all kind of work so that it's sat in a kind of boxy shape, which I think is what was intended. Now, this is probably user error on my part. I've seen lots of beautiful finished garments from this pattern, but nevertheless, because I couldn't get my head around it, I modified the pattern. So I reduced the number of increases I made along here above the bust. I then knit straight for a section, and I've then done decreases down the sides to create a really tapered shape. Hoping you can see that. This has also affected the sleeves and the kind of sleeve attachment to the body. So this is now more of a kind of dropped shoulder design. I kept the sleeves incredibly wide. They've got this beautiful like clustered stitch and eyelet pattern going from the top of the shoulder, off the yoke and down the sleeve. And I really love how dramatic these sleeves are. This jumper has got a huge amount of wear already, and really, really pleased with it. Right, I hope I'm not gallivanting through these too quickly, again given the light restrictions. Another recent finished object is this hat. This was something I mocked up with no pattern in mind. I haven't written up a pattern for it either. It is using, if you can even call it a colourwork motif, it's a colourwork motif that I have been using for my finished knitted products that I sell via work.knits. It is essentially a 4 round repeat where you alternate your 2 colours and you repeat that, the same positioning for 2 rows, and then you switch and you do the alternate positioning for the next 2 rows. I will try and include somewhere a little chart to show you what I mean, but hopefully that's a nice simple one to be able to replicate if you wish to. The hat is knit in Knitting for Olive Double Soft Merino, which is a new favourite of mine. It's a beautiful fabric. And again, I will put colourways below, but I think one of them's kind of the dusky rose colour and the other is this beautiful raspberry colour. So that is a quick knit that I have finished recently that has accompanied me on recent trips. It comes nicely over my ears. I've got quite a lot of hair which gets bunched up in the top here, so it can either be a bit baggier if you like to wear your hair down, or it can accommodate a bun if that's how you like to wear your hair. My next finished object, or half finished object I should say, is this sock. This is going to be another pattern. Sorry, my finished objects are a little bit heavy on my own patterns here. This is going to be a new pattern when I've knitted the second sock, and it is made with a heel flap and gusset, or heel flap and turn, and I don't know how well you can see, but it's got a nice kind of flea stitch colourwork motif, and then a kind of almost like striped or faux rib colourwork pattern, and then the toe and the heel are done in solid orange. This is knit up in work.knits Sock Yeah base, which is a lovely wool and nylon blend, really, really sturdy for socks. And I think the main thing for me with this design was just experimenting with a different type of heel flap for me. This heel is knitted with double knitting, so you're essentially creating 2 layers of fabric, rather than maybe, for example, what's the other heel flap? Is it called a heel, partridge heel? The ones with the slip stitches that create, it's a really beautiful pattern on the outside. I just find that for me personally, when those wear a bit, I get felting on the pattern, which can not look so nice after a little while. So I wanted to trial using double knitting as a technique to reinforce the heel flap. I knit these on 2.5mm needles, and that really suits my style of knitting. I'm an English style knitter, and I knit quite tightly. I really struggle to get similar gauges to designers who knit continental normally. That's a particular challenge, but 2.5mm needles seems to suit me for socks. I have women's UK size 4.5 feet, which is relatively small, so I have bought 1 ball of each colour, or one hank or 1 skein. I think they're 50 grams each, and that should make me a pair, but we will see when I move on to the second sock. This is going to be quite a rare finished object for me, in the sense that I am not normally a sock knitter, so it's nice to be able to have one for the very first episode. And my final finished object is not a knitted object, but I thought I'd share because it is related to that last half finished object, and that is this little drawstring bag. This is made from a shirt sleeve, a men's shirt sleeve, and I whipped them up originally to help with my commuting back and forth to London for my day job. I was using them to kind of package up my items in my rucksack to kind of organise everything. But I found that it's the perfect size for a sock knitting project, so was really excited to finish this off, and made a couple more for my work.knits shop, just in case anyone else had a similar thought. So that's it for finished objects for now, and I think we can turn to works in progress. The first work in progress that I wanted to share with you is another hat project, and I'm just going to turn it the right way round. There we go. Okay, and again, light is not going to be our friend. So you can see it's a twisted rib design. It's knit up in DK on 4mm needles, I believe. Yep. And this is just going to be quite a simple hat design. I'm going to probably knit another inch, I should imagine, and then turn my knitting inside out and start working in the reverse direction. And this is so that when the bottom of the hat is folded up to create a folded brim, I will have my twisted rib stitch showing both on the brim that's folded and above on the main part of the hat. Because as I'm working in the round, I'm only twisting my knitted stitches, so I didn't want 2 different types of rib showing. An interesting detail on this hat, I say detail as if it was intentional and as if I'm keeping it, but you'll see, potentially you can see on camera, maybe not, but between my 2 fingers here and here, there is a dip in my cast on edge. For anyone who's been doing long tail cast ons and getting annoyed by either ending up with too much yarn left over at the end of the cast on that kind of loose tail, or having too little, I have been experimenting with different ways to combat that. I'm quite an impatient person. I'm not very good at measuring out yarn for cast-ons. So I will try and share, maybe in a future episode, how I've been dealing with that. But on this particular hat, I have figured that it's 4 mile and a half. He is not going to mind too much. I will go back in at the end, probably with a crochet hook, and just fill in that gap using a bit of extra yarn. But yes, I just thought I'd flag it as something that I've been toying with different methods for. I found a lot better methods than the one that I've used on this hat, but I thought I'd share those in another video if people are interested. In terms of the yarn being used on this hat, my other half is very heavy wearing when it comes to his knitwear, which may make him sound quite knitworthy, but actually he kind of just chucks his hats and stuff in his bag or on a shelf when he gets back in. Thank God it's not the floor. But he is quite tough on them, and so I have opted for a yarn with quite a high acrylic component to it. So it will stand up to lots of washing and lots of rough and tumble in bags. This is a Women's Institute yarn. I have not knitted with yarn from them before. I'm using it. Was given it by a friend, and might purchase some more for future hat projects because it's working up really nicely. The light was failing fast, so please excuse the slight change up to the lighting situation. To continue with works in progress, I have got a couple of t-shirt projects on the go. I really enjoy knitted t-shirt, kind of relaxed style garments for use particularly in the spring when I'm commuting into the city, wearing kind of thick jumpers, even if at the outside weather kind of warrants those garments. I find hopping on and off of transport and in and out of offices, I get a little bit warm. So the t-shirt's kind of that perfect transitional season garment. So my first t-shirt project that is on the needles is this one. This is knit up in Holst yarn in their kind of navy colourway. It's kind of a navy black blend. I've got it caked up here. You probably can't particularly see the cake, but caked up. It's a fingering weight yarn. I know a lot of people are now very aware of Holst, but for those who are not, it is one of my favourite yarns. I have lots of it in my stash. Reasons for loving it, honestly, I've been using it since I was a student, and it's just very affordable but very good quality and comes in really beautiful colours. It's a 2-ply jumper weight yarn that can be held double or single. It knits up beautifully when held double, as mentioned in one of my finished objects. That was knit up in Holst, the bright sweater. And so I'm holding it single stranded here. This is a t-shirt made up using the Strange Brew colourwork sweater recipe from Tin Can Knits, and I've just used a couple of the motifs in the back of the book and made up my own kind of striping motif here, and it's working out really beautifully. I cast it on beneath the collar, knit the yoke, and then went back and I've added a folded neckline. I'm a big fan of these at the moment. I know they've shot to popularity or to fame due to a lot of the designers using these in recent patterns. I've been particularly enjoying adding them on after it, like picking up stitches from my cast on and then adding them in. I find that gives them a lot more strength and they keep their shape for a lot longer. But particularly for those transitional seasons, as I mentioned before, I think the folded hem is really nice because it kind of moves garments out of that sweater category and into looking more like t-shirts. So very excited by this. As mentioned, I am quite a tight knitter, which means my row gauge is normally a little bit off. So I've had to knit a couple of rows after I chose to finish my colourwork before then splitting for the sleeves. And I'm now just decreasing down the side here, a couple of decreases every 5 or so rows, and then I'm knitting straight. Currently on hold yarn or waste yarn whilst I work on another project, but very excited to get this finished. I think that's about all to share on this. Oh, the other yarn that I've used as the contrast yarn is called Ripened Corn, and I will put the yarn brand down below, but I picked this up when I was in London at Beautiful Knitters, a beautiful yarn shop with a really lovely ethos actually. But I don't know the yarn brand because when I picked it out I wasn't searching for a specific brand, it just kind of caught my eye and so I grabbed it. But it's called Ripened Corn, I know that much. And what's really beautiful is I wanted a gold, but I never would have married gold with a kind of purpley pink hue. And actually in this, it gives the colourwork this kind of antique gold look, which I really love. So very much enjoying that t-shirt. Okay, for my next work in progress and my last, I think, that I'll share today, I'm storing this in a zip top bag. This is not actually a knitting project bag. This was a bag I picked up years and years ago to actually house like a wash bag. And it's by a company called Shruti, and I don't know if they are still making bags, but this has lasted me for ages and is the perfect size for sweater projects and t-shirt projects. So this next t-shirt, I'm going to pull out the pattern to make sure I'm giving you all the juicy details. But this next pattern is a Filcolana pattern, and I chose it because I was visiting Copenhagen back in January, my first international trip since before the COVID-19 pandemic. And I picked up a number of skeins or like balls of Filcolana Saga, and I knew I kind of wanted to make a t-shirt, but I didn't know what I wanted to make, so I kind of got what I thought would roughly be enough. I got two 50-gram balls of a main colour and then a couple of contrast colours, and then I went on their website fully expecting to need to use Google Translate, and found instead that a pattern that I loved was also in English, so this worked out very well for me. So the pattern I'm about to show you is the Medina t-shirt, which is a pattern designed by Han Rimmen, if I'm pronouncing the designer's name correctly, very kindly translated into English by June Thompson. And this is part of a new collection that they launched in January, so very timely with my trip. And the t-shirt is inspired by Moroccan, the Medinas in Morocco, and what the carpets were used for. So I found that a lovely point of inspiration, and when I show you in a minute, you'll definitely visually pick up on the Moroccan inspired design. The final things I should say about this before I go into the details on where I'm up to is that having picked up the yarn before I'd chosen a pattern, I saw this pattern used Saga and jumped on it and started swatching, and then realised that it's meant to be Saga held with their Alva base, which I believe is their mohair base. I don't know, but I believe it is. So I haven't held this with mohair, and it's meant my gauge is a little bit off. Which is fine. I have just needed to do some maths, and I've gone up a couple of sizes from what I would have knitted had I been on gauge. And the other thing that I did was, what was the other thing? The other thing I did. Oh yes, I had a look at the pattern very helpfully. Both tells you the finished garment circumference and the chest circumference that relates to each size, so you can also figure out that maybe you want less positive ease or more, but I thought that was a really nice touch because not all patterns tell you both of those measurements. So without further ado, this is my Medina t-shirt, very crunkled from being in the project bag. So further modifications were a folded hem. That seems to be the theme for me at the moment. And then also in the original pattern there is quite a section of the main colour before you go into the colourwork design, but what that meant was that then the colourwork design would come up above the split for the sleeves. This is knit bottom up if that wasn't clear from that description just then. So I knew that I didn't want colourwork coming across the centre of my bust. On me personally, that's just not a very flattering place to put the colourwork, so I wanted the colourwork to sit instead below the split for the sleeves, and therefore hopefully below my bust. So a couple of alterations there, but other than that I have knit this two pattern. As you can see, I've knit the front section flat from above the colourwork and the sleeve split, and then I have knit the back section and then seamed them together at the shoulders with a 3-needle bind off, which has created a beautiful, really neat seam. I have now got a needle precariously hanging on the inside of this, where I'm picking up stitches around the neckline to do a folded collar, and I will then divide the remaining yarn I have left in this main colour to do both the sleeves, which I believe are worked in short rows and then in the round. So very much looking forward to finishing this, and I will put details of all the different colours I've used down below, but you can see a little bit more here. This mustard colour is also Ficalana Saga, as is the dark purple colour. The hot pink and the white are two yarns that I had in stash that are technically not the same weight as Saga, that I hoped would kind of even out the colour work, because I've opted to use the same needle size throughout this garment, because lots of the colour work, and you might be able to see, is in rows where you're not taking any yarns as floats behind stitches. They're just kind of knit almost in stripes. So I knew that it wouldn't have quite the same bunching effect that you can sometimes get in colour work that affects your gauge. So I've used a yarn from Knoll Yarns, which is a UK yarn company that do yarn on big cones for commercial use. So I've held 2 strands of their superfine lamb's wool in a colourway called Papaya. I've held that double, and then that's the hot pink, and then I've used another yarn which I got on a cone from Uppingham Yarns, which is also a UK yarn shop, a very long time ago. It's got a kind of, it's white, a 2-ply jumper weight with some blue tweedy flecks going through it. So really pretty, but just a few kind of a bit of usage of scrap yarn there. So I think that's everything for works in progress at the moment. I'm definitely someone that has multiple projects on the go. I've been going through a bit of a frogging frenzy recently, because like many knitters, I'm sure, my style of knitting and the quality of my knitting products just keeps getting better, which is really lovely to see. But it also means that I'm looking at projects I made a while ago, and I love the yarn, I love the idea, but I can now execute them better, and so I'd like to. So I've been frogging an awful lot of stuff, and just trying to do a general kind of sort out, and really trying to take on that principle that if you don't like something whilst you're knitting it, you're not probably going to like it when you finish it. With a couple of key exceptions there, but as a general rule of thumb, if there's something that's not quite looking right when you're knitting it, it's probably not gonna improve once you've finished. So yes, all of that just to say that I have lots of other projects sat in bags or sat waiting to be frogged, but I think those are the main ones that I'm working on at the moment, and I'm particularly excited to get this top finished. And I think now I will be moving on to a little bit of sectional acquisitions. I won't normally be including acquisitions. I have not bought very much yarn this year, and I probably won't do. I'm trying to restrict my yarn purchases to kind of key dates and for key reasons. All of that being said, when in Copenhagen and Sweden in January, I did take the opportunity to pick up some yarn that I couldn't easily access here in the UK. So if that is not your thing, I completely understand. Thank you so much for joining me for this first episode. Really grateful for the support in the early days of this podcast, and my promise is that it will continue to get better, but any feedback you have will be very well received. If you are staying with me, have a sip of your hot drink or your soft drink, take a breather, and then we will jump into acquisitions. Okay, so as mentioned, a number of acquisitions from my recent trip, and the first of which is a number of balls of yarn of Ficalana Panilla, which is their DK weight yarn. It's a Peruvian highland wool, I believe, and it's beautifully smooth and has this amazing drape, but I think the drape is caused by this very specific density to the yarn, and obviously the gauge you knit it at, but I've just found it produces these really polished looking garments. Now, I didn't share what I'm knitting with this in my works in progress section because it's a pattern design that I will be releasing soon, and I want to give it its full due when that happens, but also because it will be a gift for someone very special in my life. So more on that to follow, but for now I can share with you the colours and the yarn that I purchased for that project. So just leaning over here to grab some of these. I got 4 key colours in the Ficolana Panilla, and I will list the colourways below, but essentially it's like a kind of dusky rose colour, actually that's coming up quite true to colour on camera. It's kind of almost like a cross between a salmon colour and a coral. It's not orange, it definitely is pink, but it's got kind of a zinginess to it, which I love. A dusky blue colour, which I think is turning up a little bit dark on camera. Anna's got a nice little bit of sewing thread on it. Turning up quite dark on camera, but it's a kind of dusky grey blue. And then finally this colour, which I'm informed is called Marzipan, but it will be my main colour in my new project, with these 3 colours as key contrast colours. So I'm very excited to knit this up. I bought 4 or 5 balls of the Marzipan colour, and then just 1 ball each of the contrast. So maybe that gives you some clues as to what I'm up to with it, but very excited to share more on that soon. Okay, so those skeins or balls were bought in Sommerfuglen in Copenhagen, if I am pronouncing that correctly. And whilst there, I also picked up a few other bits that I didn't think I, again, would be able to easily access in the UK. It goes without saying this is probably one of the biggest yarn hauls, in inverted commas, that I have ever done. And this really isn't something that will be regular on this channel, but I just really wanted to take the opportunity whilst I was there to get hold of some yarns that I wouldn't otherwise be able to, and I have some very specific projects in mind for them. So I got some Sandnes Garn Sunday fingering weight yarn, and again, not quite showing up on camera true to colour. Oh, that's a bit better. So it is a really beautiful cross between a mauve and a rose. It's a really specific colour that if you had a gradient of pink to purple, it would sit in a very complicated to describe area in the middle. And I'm really excited to make, I've got 1 of 2 ideas for this, so we'll see which one inspires me the most first, but I either want to make a pair of fingerless mitts, because I have just made some for my younger sister and she absolutely loved them, or I might make a hat. And if I do make a hat, I will probably use some scraps from my stash or from some of these other yarns that I'm going to show you to do maybe some colour work in there. I think that'd be really nice. The other Sandnes Garn purchase was Tresco, and I don't know if all these yarn ball labels are going to be appearing in the right direction for you on camera. Tresco is, when I picked it up I thought it was a kind of sport to DK weight because it's very plump, but actually looking online, apparently it is a fingering weight yarn. It's 80% wool, 20% nylon, but has got a really kind of natural woolly wool kind of texture. And I've got it in this kind of graphite grey colour. It was on sale for the equivalent of £2 a ball, which I just thought was incredible, and I could get enough to make a really simple raglan sweater out of it. So I did. So a sweater for me, I think I bought 8 balls of this because I wasn't sure how far the yardage would go, and I'm going to kind of self-draft the raglan, I think. I might pick up a pattern if I can find one I like that meets the gauge I get on this yarn, or with this yarn. So I've got 8 balls, so it might be that I end up being able to make something like 2 items. It could be that that all gets consumed into a single jumper. We will have to see, but really, really excited about that, and we'll let you know how I find the yarn base as I knit it up. I have a yarn that I think I might pair with the Tresco in a sweater, but we'll come to that in a minute because that I purchased that when I was in Sweden, not in Copenhagen. So sticking with my purchases from Sommerfuglen, I also picked up some skeins of Ficalana Arwetta, which is their sock base. I showed you earlier my new sock design, and I'd like to knit a second pair in this colour combination. So I've bought 2 skeins of each of these, or 2 balls. I might create a slightly different sock design in the second set if I can make these 2 produce a pair for me, but we'll just see how far the yarn goes. Okay, moving to a shop in Sweden, where I picked up some more yarn. It's called Tante Holder. So we were in Copenhagen for the majority of our trip, but we didn't want to pass up the opportunity to see as much of that area of the world as possible, and so we jumped on the train and headed to Lund in Sweden, which was absolutely beautiful, and of course I had to pop into a yarn shop. So I got hold of the shop itself does a number of yarn lines themselves. Sorry, repeating myself. So Tante Holder makes a Surrey alpaca base, and this is coming up very true to colour on camera. It's a really thick, let me try and get a strand to show you. It's a really thick Surrey alpaca compared to the ones that I've seen, and it is 70% Surrey, 20% merino and 4% polyamide. So got a lovely 50-gram hank here, and I might combine it with the Tresco yarn that I showed you earlier to make some form of raglan, maybe colour blocked, maybe with a bit of a curved hem at the back. Some ideas are forming. Yeah, very excited. Okay. Also, whilst in that shop in Sweden, I picked up some Kremka Stellaris. So this is like a metallic yarn. It's not got sequins on it, it's just I really don't know if you're going to be able to see this, but it's a super fine, there we go, super fine metallic yarn or thread, which is 47% viscose, 41% polyester and 12% metallic yarn. You get 560 meters on 25 grams. So this actually will feature in that new design that I'm working on, that I'm keeping a little bit secret. So I won't say anything more, but I'm sure I'll have plenty of this left over, and I'm really excited to incorporate this into more of my projects. I am not someone that normally wears overt sparkle, but I do love a little bit of glitter, a little bit of like twinkle. So very excited to use this in more projects going forwards. Okay, coming up to the last couple of items, a bit like the Surrey alpaca, I picked up just one ball of a kid silk mohair. Now this is in this really gorgeous kind of cranberry colour, and it's got quite a hot pink dye in the silk core, which contrasts beautifully with the cranberry. I'm not sure that's going to show up in this particular lighting, but I'm thinking about incorporating this into a yoke of a sweater, or maybe into a cowl design, holding this probably double. I have knit cowls before with colour work where I've used just one strand of mohair for the contrast colour, and that can look really, really beautiful, but I think I want something really cosy, so I think maybe holding it double might work quite nicely. And I should say, sorry, that is from Shilana Kid Setter, and it is 70% mohair and 30% silk. Okay, my final purchase, I won't pull both cakes out because I do have more than one of them, but the final purchase was some pencil roving, or unspun yarn as it's also called, from Wool Dreamers. This is Wool Dreamers Mancholopi, made from 100% Manchega wool, and this is caked up with 2 strands held double in the caking, so you can either knit the 2 strands together straight off the cake, which would equate to 230 meters per 100 grams, or you can pull those strands apart and knit them single, which would be 460 meters per 100 grams. So I've got 2 of these in this beautiful stone colour. I am really, really looking forward to knitting this up, although I am a little bit worried because I'm a very tight knitter that it will break, but I hear that that's a very common fear, that actually when you get going it holds up beautifully. So very excited to use this. Plans for this, depending what I end up knitting that Sadness Garn Tresco up into, this could also be a very good option for a raglan style simple sweater that I can wear commuting, that will keep me warm on the train but will kind of go with some of my work outfits. Equally, this could make a really, really beautiful shawl. So something along those lines, but I'm wanting something that I could take with me when I'm away from home, and that would pack up small inside my bag but be really super warm. So very excited to use this. So I think that covers everything for this very first episode. I would really, really look forward to doing another episode with you. I'm hoping to do maybe one episode every month. And that sounds very few, but let's start with that and see if we can increase the quantity of podcasts per month. I'd also really love to start doing some maybe more in-depth dives on certain projects, maybe film bits of my knitting as I go, to share kind of the process rather than talking about things kind of after the fact. But definitely happy to do more of these kind of review sessions with what I'm working on, what I've finished, and inspiration that I have for future projects. I also sew as well as knit, so I'm very happy to start sharing some of my sewn projects here if those would be of interest. They are definitely the minority of my projects. My focus at the moment is very much on knitting, but there are a couple that I'd be very happy to share. So thank you for coming with me on this very first episode of the Work.knits podcast. I'm really, really excited to see where this space goes and to watch it hopefully grow organically and find its own kind of form and flow. But I thought it'd be nice as a starting point to kind of anchor this channel with a very traditional style podcast episode. If you would like to see what I'm up to in between podcast episodes, then please feel free to follow me over on Instagram. You can find me there at work.knits, the dot being like a period punctuation mark. And you can also find me on Ravelry. I will include details below. But yes, I really hope you have enjoyed this episode, and I will see you next time.